Rebecca Marcus, welcome back to Seeing Other People.
Thank you so much, Alana. I'm happy to be here.
So happy to have you. It's been a little over like a year and a half, and we're finally doing this in person.
Yeah.
After a quick little hello that we had of meeting IRL earlier this summer, which was wonderful. But really excited to have you. I got a lot of great feedback from my audience after our last episode. And you are a therapist. You're a licensed clinical social worker. I am so curious. Like last time we talked about, building confidence and overcoming dating anxiety. What are the majority of your clients coming to you saying like, this is what I'm struggling with? Like, what are the common themes that you're really seeing amongst your, I imagine, Gen Z millennial women that you speak to?
Yeah. So I kind of see a mix of people that are single and dating and people that are maybe in relationships. And so I find from the single and dating and looking, there can be sometimes like a discouragement or like fatigue around going out with guys that aren't the right fit. Or not knowing other places to meet people besides dating apps.
Yeah.
With people that are now thankfully in relationships that maybe came to me initially when they were dating and now they're in a relationship, I think it's sort of that realization. I think we talked about it last time that there's still like ongoing work and communication and like stuff that's going to come up and how to navigate that, and also continuing to still like take care of yourself in a relationship. Yeah.
100%. Do you think, like, obviously, I mean, everyone listening is like nodding along. Like, yes, we feel burnout. Yes, like we feel like we're trying to do all the right things, but there's still things that like aren't working. Do you feel like the majority of the women you speak to, like, is it a women problem? Is it a male problem in heterosexual relationships, or is it an everybody problem?
I think it's an everybody problem, and I'm glad that you brought that up because I think, there can be a tendency sometimes for women to maybe like villainize men.
Yeah.
And obviously like there's people on both sides that maybe are, like have issues with things, but I think men also struggle with dating. They just have different challenges. And personally, I find just for myself, like understanding what the challenges are for guys and like how men work, I feel like I can help women better, with certain things that are like, wait, this is normal for a man, or like, this is normal for a woman. Because I think sometimes there's a lot of like unrealistic expectations that people have. One around like what you need around like setting realistic non-negotiables or like things that actually matter. And then also sometimes expecting men to maybe act or function the same way as women. So I find we like kind of working through some of that.
Well, let me ask you this. With like you mentioned the setting realistic expectations. Like if someone comes to you and is like, here's what I'm looking for, like here's my checklist, how can you help them differentiate like what is a realistic expectation and something that you really do, like what does matter in a partner versus what's a nice to have or a more superficial thing? And like when do you find that people are pushing back on things? Like what are they pushing back on?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, and you definitely probably heard it from people before too, that they're like, well, I think like I could combine these two guys.
Yeah.
But kind of remembering no one's perfect. So I think the idea of perfection is often what kind of gets in a lot of people's way of just agreeing to go out with each other for guys and women. But yeah, I mean, I would kind of help them to think about like what are the core values and like kind of a vision for the future long term, because those things matter a lot more. Obviously, we want to be attracted. So I think people will push back a lot about like attraction or maybe like career. And so it's still realistic to want someone to be like ambitious or like to want to be attracted. But
of course, yeah.
We can like, and I tell women it's sort of a difference with men. I think men in terms of attraction, they typically will know right away if they're attracted or not attracted. Whereas women, I think it can definitely grow. Obviously, if you feel grossed out or like initially, like it might not, but often it can. And so sometimes with that of like, I had a client once and she's like, why do I always like these sort of shiny guys that, and it's like asking her like, well, what was your initial response when someone showed you this guy that like actually is nice looking, but maybe he doesn't look like a supermodel or he's not, like polished and so sometimes just helping them get curious and sort of say like, okay, do you want to get married? Like if you don't, like kind of, gently like exploring with them, like how's that working for you? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Like, how is dating this one type of person that, maybe they have some qualities, but maybe they lack the important qualities about pursuing a life partnership with them.
Right. The sustainability, I think often people don't always think about.
Yeah. Why is it that men know more so from the start? Like, does it, because what comes to mind for me, and I'm curious if this is like correct or off base, is that like women can desire more of an emotional connection in order to feel that physical attraction, but men don't need that. Like, what's going on there?
Right. Yeah. And I'm like careful to try to be PC. I know.
Yeah. PC, and of course, like no platitudes. Like it's not all men,
right?
Not all
100%.
women, not all people. Yeah,
we're more talking about like heterosexual relationships and like cisgender, male, female. But I think that men are a little bit more like hormonally driven in that way. They definitely still need emotional connection. But they say, if you've heard like the differences in terms of like people getting aroused, that men, it's like a flip of a switch. Like it's kind of physical. They can like instantly get aroused. Whereas women often, even if like you're dating someone for a while, like you kind of need a little bit of emotional connection first to feel safe, to then like want to be more in the mood for that. So I think if you're sometimes just seeing somebody on the street, like, I don't know, once you get to know them, you're like, oh, I like their energy. Like I feel safe. And so I think that that's part of it. Obviously, like we could still, women, there's the guys that they're instantly attracted to.
Right.
But sometimes then they might not have some of the qualities to be like a good partner or like help you when things are not always like hot and heavy or, like the real life happens.
Yeah. What about if someone, they understand and can recognize that like, okay, having a partner who makes this amount of money like isn't necessary, but I really don't want to compromise on the lifestyle that I expect to be provided with. Like, how do you work with somebody like that? And is there a case where it's like, okay, like if that's the most important thing to you, like, sure, don't compromise on that, but you might be missing out on a lot of great partners.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely like an Upper East Side, New York City question, but you hear it everywhere. It's definitely something that I think is valid because obviously like we need money to function and you want to feel like taken care of. But I mean, I definitely will say to people, if that's the only thing someone has, like money comes and goes. And if they're not kind and they don't have like compassion or like balance in their life, it's only going to get you so far. And they might actually use the money to kind of control you. So it's good to have. And I don't think it's a bad thing to look for someone that you feel like, okay, they're going to be a provider. But sometimes if there is potential and a person is like, I don't really like his job, I might even say, you don't know, like, does that person have family money? Do they have investments? Like, you never fully know. So I always think it's a good idea to have a conversation. And also, I think we all know the people that are very successful and motivated, and then maybe they're not really prioritizing their relationship or their family.
Right.
So I think it's a balance.
Yeah, that one can definitely be a double-edged sword. Like, and I feel like there are like that can be applied to anything on someone's checklist.
Yeah.
Like, it can be too much, or it can be in a way that you might not expect, or it's so hard like navigating what people want with also it's like what people want, what they should want, and what's actually out there, and what wants them.
Right. Yeah, I know. You need like it just all, once it all lines up.
Yeah.
But you only need to find one.
Right. All it takes is one, which is like, how do you help people when they're feeling like, I have tried so hard, I've gone on a million dates, I've tried all the apps, I've gone to mixers, I've gone to speed dating, I go to Shabbat, I do this, I do that, and I still haven't met somebody. Like, what advice do you give that person who really just feels like they have exhausted all options, they're still single, they don't want to be, and they're losing hope?
It's so hard, and it's such a real struggle that I think we've all probably felt at one time, that hopelessness. So I usually try to have people kind of go within and almost like step back and say, like, when you're in this place of feeling really hopeless or lonely or like anxious, maybe like don't swipe on the apps, or like take a moment, come back. Like, it could be good to look at maybe like, are there things I could change? Would I consider going out with this person? Like, where are there blocks where maybe like I'm closed? And be around other people that are supportive friends that are maybe in the same space can help too. I think it sometimes leaning into the like faith a little bit. Yeah. I mean, it's really hard, but I think just like owning where you're at, like saying like, I feel lonely, or like, I want to meet someone, like my friends are getting engaged or having kids or whatever, like acknowledging it, but then also trying to put yourself into a place where you're like, okay, you know what? I haven't met them yet. Let me take a break. If I feel burnt out, it's not really the time to date. Let me let people know what I'm looking for. Like, and kind of like, I like to bring in sometimes visualization just to be like, well, what would I feel like when I do meet the person? And that also is just like kind of like a metric also for where we are internally, because I've done that with some people and they're like, oh wow, like I'm in so much, like I can't even imagine what that would feel like. Yeah. Or
they're in such a bad place.
Yeah. And so sometimes just being like allowing yourself to get there and say like, okay, it will happen. I don't know when, but like I find you almost have to like talk yourself out of it, but you shouldn't like ignore that you feel that way. Like, you should take time to validate it and get like actual helpful support. Don't talk to other people that are really anxious or like really negative.
Yeah. Can I ask a little bit more on the personal life side? Like, you are a therapist, you're also a friend. How do you handle or approach conversations where like your friends are coming to you and they're having a really tough time? Like, how can you separate like, okay, they're not my client. Like, I do want to support them. They're coming to me for help, but I don't want to like psychoanalyze them.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a balance. I think sometimes I'll ask. I try to validate also. And I definitely struggled with dating myself and a lot of these things, so I know how it feels. With some friends, I might offer tough love if I feel like that's what they want. Or maybe I might like ask them, like, do you actually want my advice, or like, do you want me to just listen? Because I've definitely got into situations sometimes where people are asking for advice, but then they're not really taking it.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's just kind of also normalizing that, like, all right, sometimes you kind of have to just like go through it. Going back to people that maybe like aren't really the best person for them, or kind of being in that like negative place. And I'm here like when you want to, like, I'll keep you in mind. Like, I try to do just that and then validate that it's hard. But I also like I feel like I really do believe that there's someone for everyone. And it's like every time I feel like I see people, whether it's like clients or friends or even myself, like they get into this place where they're like, I'm not really worried. I'm just enjoying my life. Like, I haven't really met anyone yet, but like, I know it always just comes.
That's when it happens.
Yeah.
And which is so annoying.
So annoying
because you can't force it. It has to like really happen organically. It's not that when you stop looking, you'll find somebody. It's that like when you actually feel good and like show up in the world the way you want and aren't desperately needing somebody, then you may be more likely to find somebody based on what we've seen.
Yeah. And I heard this metaphor. It's like the idea of a well versus a pit. And when you kind of like make yourself into a well, it takes a lot longer. Like, you're digging it, you're filling it with a lot of things. But then when you meet someone, you both can like pour into each other.
Like that.
Versus coming in like two empty pits and like you're lonely and there's an urgency and like you're not really able to give
You're
each
both
other.
fighting for resources. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. What about specifically in the Jewish community? Because I have spoken to listeners and dating coaching clients who feel similarly to everybody else, but I think feel a little more so like everyone around me is moving forward with their life in terms of, they met their partner likely at a younger age. They've gotten married. They've had kids. And suddenly I feel so left behind. And I don't even know where to look because it feels like everyone in my orbit is already coupled up. How do you help somebody in that situation?
Well, I always try to ask them what they're looking for and tell them I'd love to keep you in mind, and first kind of just start with that they could come from anywhere, or I'll think for you, just so that they feel supported, because I think often people can feel very forgotten. But I do always like to keep people in mind. So sometimes if they come to me in that way, I'll sort of start with that. And then also maybe sort of looking for other like-minded people, or places they can go where they don't feel like they're isolated or alone, because I think it can be hard sometimes going to events or things where you feel like everyone's coupled up. So it is important to have your a supportive group of people, even if it's just one or two people, and kind of going to events if they feel good for you. I think tuning into how you feel when you're swiping on the apps, or you're at an event, or even when you're on a date, tuning into your own energy, I think is so important. With just, being able to shift it if you're not doing well. And then also just in terms of kind of being successful in meeting someone, I think it makes a difference.
Yeah. And I think that applies to whatever community or in your whatever social circles around you. It's you might feel like you are the only one. Realistically, you're not.
Yeah.
But continuing to show up if you can, the more people you can meet, the more people can have you in mind.
And letting people, sometimes it feels vulnerable to tell people that, but I think people are always happy to, especially in the Jewish community, to help. But it can feel vulnerable to say oh, hey, I'm looking for someone. This is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But you never know. I think the person can come from anywhere.
Yeah, it can make all the difference. So you're married. How did you and your husband meet?
We met on a website called Sayut Sinai.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're on their website.
Amazing.
So, but it was kind of also, I wasn't really putting that much effort into it. It was just a website I had signed up to. I don't know. I was putting a lot of more effort into guys in New York. My husband was living in Toronto at the time. And I had just kind of decided I'm open to people in other places. Why not? And then I got the matchmakers send you someone. So then we did a Zoom before it was a thing to do
pre-COVID.
Yeah. And I also was oh, I don't know, maybe he was applying to medical school at the time. He was coming for an interview. So I'm okay, we can meet in person. But yeah, I was just kind of open. I didn't know, I felt I was there were so many guys in New York, but it was also a sort of well, I haven't really met, I was frustrated with it.
Yeah.
And so that's when I decided to look at myself and be what am I prioritizing, and what things should I be more open to? And it was okay, an out of town guy, I could be more open to, or
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that it's something you just kind of signed up for, and you weren't putting all of your eggs in the Sayut Sinai basket.
Yeah.
It's just it's why you should put your name on every matchmaker's free list. You have no reason not to do things like that, because you literally never know.
Right. And it's kind of not attaching to it's going to come from a specific place, but just being it could come from anywhere. I'm just going to I'm still putting the effort in. I'm showing up.
Yeah.
And I did feel at that time in my life, I was more of okay, life is fun and good, and I can enjoy my life in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. What were some of the pieces of advice that people were giving you when you were single and looking for love?
So the helpful pieces, I would say I had a mentor say to me, you should prioritize wholesome. That's a really good trait to prioritize. because I don't think that's something I really would have thought of. But yeah, just kind of that one, like it can grow, give it a little chance to grow if there's potential. And don't like understanding the differences between men and women, I think helped a lot too. Like kind of like why is, I don't know, just the way that guys think versus women. I think having mentors that were sort of like, yeah, they're not going to be the same. Like if he's, doing this or whatever, that doesn't mean he's not interested. Like he's a guy. Or I'm trying to think of other things. Just kind of that somebody maybe like he was going into medical school. He wasn't yet. I mean, he's still about to like finish his residency, but what he wasn't like didn't have a career yet, but he had some potential and a track. And so that's also what I feel like I got some advice around, like, okay, he has potential and like he's going in a good direction. Like it would be more convenient if he had already finished his training. Like it was a long road to go through medical school residency.
Yeah, and to be the partner of somebody doing all that, like that is a big commitment to make, and there is a lot of sacrifice that comes with it. But so like there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with anything.
Nobody has everything. Yeah. And I think it's remembering that too. Yeah.
What did wholesome mean to you when it was like look for wholesome? Like what was that?
That's a good question. I think it meant kind of like, you feel like a sense of safety or security, or it feels kind of like you feel like you're at home. You can be yourself with the person. That's kind of how I read it, but it wasn't something I really thought at that time. I was like, oh, that's not like that exciting.
Yeah.
But now like 2 kids later, seeing someone that's like helpful to me postpartum and in times when like stuff is stressful, I think makes a big difference.
100%. Wholesome and homesome. I'm surprised there isn't a term for that, like when someone makes you feel at home.
Yeah, I know. It's an interesting thing. Right. No, I guess you can coin that term.
Homesome. Homesome. Okay. I have a bunch of listener questions that I'm excited to get to.
Okay,
I dug through my recent archives, and there were some I pulled that I think really work with, or just I'm really curious to get your insight on this.
Okay.
The one I want to start with is, I'm in my healing era and trying to quote unquote do the work, but sometimes I feel like I'm just performing self-growth instead of actually changing. How can you tell the difference between real emotional growth and just romanticizing the idea of working on yourself?
That's a really good question. And I think it comes up a lot now with kind of the trendiness of mental health on social media. Well, I think intellectually deciding that you want to change and beginning to understand yourself is a first step. But we also want to get into kind of the emotional part too, which isn't always like so cut and dry. And sometimes it's a bit more messy. So I think I try to, and I was the same way, and I still sometimes am like being like, oh, I wonder why I'm doing that. Like, oh, I should really stop. But like encouraging people to pause and be present and kind of tune into their body and their nervous system. And also sometimes you see women like very successful, like everything looks good on paper, and then they have maybe a harder time being vulnerable or opening up.
Yeah.
And so I think just getting curious to explore that and see if there is a wound there, because we all have something, whether it's, from like growing up or whether it's a past relationship or a combination of it all. So I think that can sometimes help. And also looking at your life and your relationships and like, how are my friendships? Do they feel reciprocal? Is there drama that I'm involved in? How is it going with dating? How do I feel when I'm like with myself, like day to day? Like, how is my mood? How is my ability to like be decisive or trust myself?
Yeah. I like the idea of asking yourself, how do you feel? Because I think it's one thing to like question, like, am I doing this right? And like kind of use all the self-help buzzwords that you've seen online and in the books and stuff.
Yeah.
And like look inwards versus just like, how do I feel? Like with my relationships, with my friendships, with the choices that I'm making, the things I'm occupying my time with. Like, am I happy? Am I questioning so deeply how I feel because I'm not happy? Or am I just like trying to fill a void? Like, I think I can like self-help help myself to a better life. But like, yeah, like I think we so rarely like, or so often kind of go up and over and left and right and try to like flip things upside down when all we really need to do is ask like, how do I feel about this?
And sometimes just being present with where you are.
Yeah.
Like it might go up and down, you know, like having breakdowns isn't always a bad thing when you're doing the work. It probably means it's working.
Yeah. I have a similar question from somebody in a relationship.
Okay.
Someone wrote in saying, my partner and I are almost too good at communicating. Like every conversation turns into a therapy session. We process every little thing. Can you over communicate to the point where it kills the spark? And if so, how do we stop?
Interesting.
I always wonder about this when it's like two therapists dating each other.
I can't even imagine. Well, I definitely find my husband, he is a big communicator. Right. Well, I think sometimes it's like pausing and being like, is this helping? Are we just going in circles? And also sometimes people are going to want to like keep talking, whereas someone else is like, I feel kind of like we could put it to bed. And so I think almost sometimes like talking about like, how is this going for us? Like, are we getting somewhere with it? Yeah. And with the spark, I think that's something to also have realistic expectations that there's different phases of relationships. So when we first get into a relationship, we can have more of that like exciting spark. And it's not that we don't want that like ongoing, but sometimes when you move into more of like a companionship secure phase, sometimes you have to create the spark with maybe like, date night or like kind of more like enjoyable activities or like connecting emotionally or like the intentional things, because definitely you can get into a place where it could feel like a business and you're like, okay, like we need this stuff, or you're like over communicating. I don't think it's over communicating. I think it's just do you want to continue talking, or like is it okay? We don't have to keep talking about this. Like kind of just checking in with it, like taking the temperature a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like in the past I've had to do that in a similar but different situation where it was like we would talk about work so much.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, like let's like we're going to put a timer on like the next 15 minutes. Like we can talk about work as much as we want, and then we're going to stop talking about work. Like I'm sure I've also like heard from friends who are married where it's like they're finally like have a night without the kid and they have a sitter and they're like going out, but they're just talking about the kid. And then they have to say like, okay, we're not talking about our child anymore after 5 minutes from now. Like we have to talk about other things. And sometimes it is just like acknowledging this thing is happening. Like let's put a timer on it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think even in general, people, if there's like a conflict and people are fighting, even sometimes if you can pause for a moment and say like, hey, we're both kind of spiraling, like let's revisit when we're more calm. Yeah. That ability to like zoom out and observe.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Okay. Let's go with this one. If someone is single and doing all of the right things, aka I'm in therapy, I'm journaling, and I do a lot of self-reflection, but I still feel lonely, what is your advice? Can loneliness exist even when you're in a good place? And if so, how do I stop that?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid and good question. I mean, loneliness can exist even when you're in a relationship. Yeah. And I think that can sometimes be like a rude awakening. So I think it's also like just validating like, okay, I feel lonely. It might mean that you need connection. It's hard sometimes when you're going on dates and you feel lonely and you really want to meet that person. So I think I try to name it as almost like there's a longing and a desire, like you're ready to meet someone. But also in the meantime, like surround yourself with supportive people. Like if it feels right now like hard to be alone, like it's okay. But a partner in the long run, if you maybe initially they might feel it, but if you internally have struggle to be alone or sit with yourself, eventually that's still going to come up when you're with a partner. So I think it's a balance of like normalizing it, validating it, and knowing that you can take time to like be alone and like find calm in your body, but it's also okay to want to connect with people. And And so, being in a relationship, getting married, like it does solve like a bunch of your problems, but there's also other things that are still there.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like wherever you go, there you are.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said about like, are you lonely, or is it that you're longing for somebody? Because I think we're so quick to throw on the term lonely. It's like, you can be alone and not feel lonely. You can be lonely but not be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really like kind of saying, am I lonely, or do I just long for somebody? Like, do I just really want a partner? And separating that out, because then if you start telling yourself like you're really lonely, I feel like that can kind of spiral into a bigger thing when you might not actually be lonely. You might just really want to find somebody. And I don't know that it's necessarily like, if you're lonely, you can't just like snap your fingers and be like, I'm not going to be lonely anymore. Like, you do have to fill up your cup. But yeah, I do think it is, like you said, like, finding a partner doesn't solve all of your problems. You could find a partner and maybe they travel a lot for work, or maybe something happens and their home is somewhere else and they have to go back home for an extended period of time, and then you're left on your own. Like, you don't want to be so reliant on somebody else. And I think, taking the time, like, while you're lonely right now, if you do feel lonely, like, find things that fill your cup and that make you feel less lonely, so that you can still be alone at times when you need to be in the future.
Yeah, totally. And also, I think those things are good to still continue to do in a relationship.
Yeah, 100%. Also, I had a funny thought in my head when we were talking about like looking for the spark and like ways to, kind of feel that when you are in a relationship and that kind of goes away. Like, I think for me, one thing that helps me is like looking for like the little things. And so Jake and I do, like, on our weekly episode, we do gratitude. And at first we were sharing gratitude for other people in our lives. And now we also share one piece of gratitude for each other. And this past week, mine was something like so simple and silly, but it like is a reason that I love him. And like, it's fun to like take those moments and recognize them. And it was something as simple as like the fact that he put on the movie Bring It On, and then after put on the movie Fired Up, and like wanted to watch these two cheerleading movies back to back, which like I would love to do any night ever. And like, it just made me really happy and like made me feel really like giddy and like home that was what he wanted to do. And so I think like for me, I think it really has helped me like appreciate him more, and like has helped us like celebrate each other and the love that we have for each other by looking for gratitude each week about each other.
Yeah, intentionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they say in terms of like the negativity bias that we all kind of have, once you're comfortable and secure in a relationship, your brain sometimes will go to the negative and like kind of look at like, oh, why didn't they do that? Like that this is like messy. And so it really is something, sometimes you have to have an intentional practice to connect, or like to look for those things that you appreciate about the person. Because it does like shift your feeling to that too.
Yeah. Especially as life gets busy. I mean, I can only imagine once you have kids, it's like, you're so caught up in all the things that you have to do. And it could be the same thing. Like if you're dating somebody who's in med school, but then they're about to become a resident, like you get less time with them. You get less of their attention and they have less to give you. And so you really do have to, cherish and appreciate the time that you do have together and look for the joy in that versus the negativity and the frustration that they're not around as much. Right. They would like to be. They'd rather be around.
And also I think, kind of recognizing whatever stage of life you're in, that it is temporary, and not in a way that like to make you sad, but that to cherish it, but also to know like, hey, like if there's aspects of this that are not ideal, like it's temporary, and I think what you brought up with Jake is like feeling understood, like someone knows you and that you like feel like you could talk about it and say like, oh, I really appreciate this. And at this point, he knows that about you, that would be something that makes you feel seen and like homesome.
Yeah, homesome. I love it. Okay, let's find another one. Ooh, I actually really like this question. Do you think that people are ever meant to repeat certain patterns until they finally learn the lesson? Or is that just a story we tell ourselves to justify bad choices?
So I with relationship patterns and sometimes almost like engaging in maladaptive patterns, I guess I don't like to look at it as black and white, because sometimes we're almost like working through it in a sense of like some of the emotions or maybe past things that we're repeating, we have the opportunity to heal. So I think you'll keep getting that challenge until you maybe work through it. I don't think it's always a bad thing, but sometimes it takes us a little bit more time, but sometimes it requires us looking and saying like, okay, what's my role in this dynamic? And like, what is it going to take for me to stop? Because often maybe we're experiencing pleasure or like some kind of something that feels good from engaging in these patterns, or we wouldn't do it. It's not all bad. And so I like to acknowledge that, because if people come to you saying, I've had this a bunch of times, like, I don't know, I don't really want to be with this person, or like, I do want to be with this person, but they're not a good fit. I know it, but it takes them a little bit of time to maybe fully disengage. Or I think that if you are like, no, you need to go cold turkey, I find it's not really going to work. Yeah. And I even experienced this myself when I was younger with kind of, dysfunctional relationships that sometimes it does take you a little time, sometimes it doesn't. But I think validating that like you are working through it, and if you keep doing it, you're not going to necessarily find what you're wanting. And so you have to be willing to also do that work and sit with the discomfort to kind of move through it and shift it into something that's actually healthy, so that you can find, and keep a healthy relationship.
Yeah. I hear this all the time of like, I keep going from like emotionally unavailable person to emotionally unavailable person to emotionally unavailable person. And it's like, why? Like, how many more times do I have to do this before I learn my lesson? It's like, well, it sounds like you acknowledge that you're aware that you're doing the same thing, like you're dating the same person in different font. And at a certain point, it is a little bit up to you to make a different choice. Maybe you're not ready yet. Like maybe you don't actually want something to work out yet, even though you think you do. I don't know. I feel like it's such a hard conversation to navigate, because like they don't want to be in the situation anymore. But
a part of them maybe I think with like attachment trauma, or even just the way we're socialized with that like spark being the most important thing, that sometimes it feels good in the moment. It's like that high, but typically there will then be like that crash and burn.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes tell people, like, when the pain becomes greater than that, that's often when we might tap into our motivation to make a change. But yeah, you might be repeating something. So, and I think like you're the common denominator in this. And it's not to blame. Like, I think people will experience a lot of shame sometimes. And so I like to say, like, like, let's explore that. What's going on here? And also, with guys that are emotionally available, like, how do you feel when you're with them? Like, are you giving them a chance, or are you feeling bored? Do you feel unsafe? Like, there could be so many things going on. But I think with the question that came up before about like the difference between am I like just going through the motions, or maybe I think, there comes a point where you have to like own your own role and kind of say like, you know what, I need to like not pick up the phone when this person calls, or like I need to change my number at this point. Yeah. Or, you know what, this person already told me he's not looking for a relationship. Like if he keeps reaching out, it's up to me to set the boundary. And also taking ourselves a little bit out of the victim role. We can acknowledge when hard stuff has happened, but I think there comes a point where we have to say like, okay, like I'm an adult. I have autonomy to make a new choice. Yeah. And also sometimes accepting that it's not, this person isn't going to be a good fit for me, or it's not going to work out. And it can be painful. So I think we have to make space for that grief and loss.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think instead of like blaming yourself, I think it's an opportunity to say, oh, like, wait a second, I can actually do something different. Like, I think it's cool that you have the ability, like you have agency.
Yeah.
You can make a different choice.
And it can feel empowering.
Yeah. Like, you don't have to end up in this situation again. You might make a series of choices that leaves you feeling like you ended up in the same situation. Okay, what can you do differently next time? Like, when can you exactly like not pick up the phone when they call, or hear that they're saying they're not looking for a relationship, instead of, saying to yourself like, okay, well, like,
if I wait long enough.
Exactly. I mean, I did that more times than I could count.
Yeah.
And looking back, like, I really have nobody to blame but myself. So let's do one more. Ooh, okay. There's a few.
Okay, well, we could fit them in.
Okay. Dating in my 30s feels like walking a fine line between protecting my energy and accidentally shutting people out. I have a lot less patience for red flags now, but I also have more fear that I'll never find someone. How can I tell the difference between being discerning and being avoidant?
Such a great question. Yeah, it is a delicate balance.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have mentors, whether it's like a dating coach, a therapist, or people that have the kind of relationship that you would potentially want that are a little bit ahead of you, to be sounding boards. I think that makes a big difference. And also really being clear on your own needs and non-negotiables, and having your sounding boards kind of check in with you about like, is this realistic? Or like, are you kind of going back into an old pattern? Are you overly prioritizing this and not giving someone a chance? And also to check in with if there is a little bit of a fear of vulnerability, and how are you actually showing up on dates?
Yeah.
Because maybe you are being a little bit closed, or maybe, kind of talking it out with someone to just get clarity on like, is this person really someone that's like, like they have good potential, but they're actually not for me?
Yeah.
Or am I maybe not being open? And so sometimes it is a little confusing. And so I had a mentor that told me, make clarity your goal. That's always the goal.
Love.
So even if you go out and it didn't work out, like, okay, you got clarity. Like, and I think it's a different way of looking at it. And sometimes it still can feel painful or disappointing when we get clarity.
Of course, but it feels better than not knowing.
Exactly.
I love that. Like, look for clarity. 100%.
And it might take a little bit of time. Sometimes if you don't fully have it, okay, so maybe you have to date a little bit longer. But I think it helps to have some mentors and learning to trust yourself, and tuning into like, how am I feeling on this date? How do I feel with this person? Am I feeling like they're listening to me? Am I feeling like they hear me? Am I interested in talking to them? Like, would I rather be home watching TV? Like, tuning into those things, I think helps a lot too.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. Okay. The last question says, hi, Alana, I've done so much therapy. We literally actually just talked about this. All right, let's round it out with the question, though, because I just know I get this so much. Hi, Alana, I've done so much therapy and self-reflection, but I still keep ending up with emotionally unavailable people. I guess I read this question before we started this, so it was in my head. I can see it happening earlier now, but I still fall for them. Why is awareness not enough?
And so I think that goes back to often when we get the initial insight or awareness, it's more intellectual. And so it's maybe also looking at, do we have aspects of ourselves where we're a little bit emotionally available, or are we playing out an old scenario? Freud, I know there's a lot of whatever, but like things that people don't like about him, but he had something he called the repetition compulsion. And there was an article called like remembering, repeating, and working through. And so a lot of times maybe when we're almost stuck in a pattern, we're sometimes like acting out as a way of like not going back to the original wound to like really feel that pain then and work through it. So we're looking to something else to kind of get that same like validation. But because we're not aware of it and we haven't really tapped into the emotion, we just kind of keep repeating and having the same ending. So I think we have to encourage ourselves to look at like, what is this? Like, did I feel like, is there abandonment wounds like from my parents or my dad, or like something that's coming up here within myself that I still feel like, I'm trying to solve by looking like outward.
Yeah. It's hard to do, but it's like, if it's something that you've been facing for so long and you haven't actually like gone to therapy or worked with somebody to really dive into it, like it's definitely worth it. It's your sanity, it's your life, it's your relationships, it's your emotions, it's how you feel on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes people are so afraid to like find the answer.
Well, I think it also is sometimes painful.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And so people, you know, are avoiding that. But it's also that, what is that quote of like, it's nothing's more painful than being stuck somewhere you're not meant to be.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot of courage, I think, to look at yourself and to say like, hey, there's something going on within me. Not that I have to blame myself or shame myself, but what's going on here that like I keep repeating. Yeah. And also, like just kind of being upfront with people. There's definitely, nobody's perfect, even in a relationship. Like there's going to be a time when maybe someone shuts down or like they don't really communicate or they get triggered. So I think, talking, if you're sensing someone's pulling away, if you're like just almost like being upfront with like, hey, like I like you, I feel like there's potential. Do you actually see this? Or, it can feel vulnerable, but I think sometimes being upfront helps too, because you also take your power back and advocate for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, personal question. Not personal, but my question.
Sure.
What's your favorite part about being a therapist?
Well, I love hearing all the stories that people have, and I love. I really also like some of the like jokes and laughs that can come out of it. It's really amazing to watch people change like in front of you. It's like magical that you see people like can come in, I don't know, and see you in such a different place than maybe they are right now.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for being here. Instead of closing out with the best piece of dating advice you have to give, I will ask, let's see, let me pull from my little arsenal of closing questions when someone's a repeat guest. What is the best piece of advice in general that you've heard this year?
That's a good one. I've heard this year. Maybe that like you can have it all, but not all at once.
Yeah. I'm sure that hits home with like having 2 kids right now and just juggling so many things for you. Yeah. I think that's so true. And we want to have it all. And we might. But I don't know anyone who has it all at once.
Yeah, exactly. And each stage of life is going to have pros and cons and things that feel easier and things that feel harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also just, always watching our sort of compare and despair spiral that we can easily get into.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Well, before we wrap up, are you taking new clients if people want to work with you?
Yes, I am.
Where can they find you?
They can find me on my website, rmpsychotherapy.com, or on Instagram, rm.psychotherapy. And you can email me, DM me. I'm taking new clients. I work with clients individually and also offer a dating group that works on a lot of these things we're talking about, and also a breakup group. So I'm going to be creating new rounds of those soon. But yeah, if you want to work individually, you can reach out and see if it's a good fit.
Incredible. I will have all of that linked in the show notes, and I will make sure whenever you have those groups coming up, let me know and I can post so that people can find them easily. That's incredible. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Alana.
Bye.